The late spring of 1982 painted North Tonawanda, New York, in shades of vibrant green and a promising, albeit humid, warmth. Life for David and Sarah Miller was a comfortable, predictable rhythm, much like the gentle flow of the Niagara River before it plunged into its magnificent, terrifying abyss. They lived on a quiet, tree-lined street, their modest two-story home, a pale yellow with a perpetually peeling porch swing, a testament to their aspirations and David's handy, if sometimes procrastinating, nature. The scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the faint, distant tang of the river's spray, a signature of life near the falls. Kids rode bikes unsupervised, their laughter echoing in the evening air. Neighbors waved from their porches, a tapestry of small-town life unfurling itself day by day. David, at 29, was a man carved from the blue-collar bedrock of western New York. His hands, perpetually stained with grease and oil, were his livelihood. He worked at Tony's Auto Shop, a local institution on Oliver Street, fixing everything from sputtering Pintos to rumbling Trans Ams. His days were a symphony of clanking wrenches, the smell of gasoline, and the occasional frustrated shout from Tony, his gruff but ultimately good-hearted boss. David loved cars, the mechanics of them, the logic. He found solace in taking something broken and making it hum again, a quiet satisfaction in the precise alignment of gears and the smooth purr of a restored engine. He often dreamt of opening his own garage one day, a little place where he could work on classic cars, a passion project more than a business. He had a deep, rumbling laugh that could fill a room and eyes the color of a stormy Lake Erie, sometimes gray, sometimes blue, always reflecting a quiet, thoughtful intensity. Sarah, 2 years his junior, was the light to David's earthy groundedness. Her spirit, bright and effervescent, was as captivating as her cascade of auburn hair, usually tied back with a simple ribbon during her shifts at the Daily Grind, a popular diner downtown. Sarah wasn't just a waitress, she was the heart of the place. She knew everyone's regular order, remembered their kids' names, and offered a genuine smile even when the kitchen was backed up and tempers frayed. She dreamt of opening her own little bakery one day, a place filled with the aroma of cinnamon and sugar, a quiet haven where people could forget their troubles for a while. She often sketched intricate cake designs on napkins during her breaks, her imagination bubbling with possibilities, the scent of coffee and fried food an unlikely muse. She found joy in small, simple things. A perfect sunset over the river, a freshly baked pie, the scent of lilacs after a spring rain. They were a picture of ordinary, contented young love. They had met at a high school football game, an unlikely pair, David, the quiet jock, Sarah, the vivacious cheerleader. Their love story had unfolded against the backdrop of Friday night lights, Sunday dinners at Sarah's parents' house in Lewiston, and countless drives along the scenic Niagara River Parkway, watching the mist rise from the falls. They'd been married for 3 years, their lives an interconnected tapestry, woven with shared dreams and small, daily rituals. Mornings began with Sarah's strong coffee and David's insistence on reading the sports section of the Buffalo News first, the scent of brewing Folgers filling their cozy kitchen. Evenings often involved walks around their neighborhood, or a cheap movie at the Riviera Theater, sometimes a Buffalo Sabres game on TV, if David could convince Sarah to put down her knitting needles and curl up beside him on the couch. Their conversations drifted between the mundane details of their day and the grander plans for their future, a new sofa, maybe a bigger house with a garden for Sarah, the classic car garage for David. Their biggest plan for that particular spring was a long-anticipated weekend trip to the Finger Lakes in July, a mini vacation they'd been saving for. It was a simple goal, but one they looked forward to with genuine excitement, a brief escape from the everyday grind of North Tonawanda. They talked about it over dinner, imagining the vineyards, the tranquil lakes, the quiet roads, a small bed and breakfast they'd seen in a magazine. On the evening of Thursday, May 27, 1982, Sarah finished her shift at the Daily Grind just past 9. The air was thick and humid, hinting at an approaching thunderstorm. David was already home, the familiar scent of engine oil and dial soap clinging to him after his own long day. He was sprawled on their worn floral couch, nursing a Genesee cream ale, the television a low murmur in the background, tuned to a late-night talk show. Sarah walked in, dropping her purse and keys onto the small table by the door, and kicked off her sensible work shoes, sighing softly. "Rough day," David grunted, not looking up from the TV. "You know it," Sarah replied, heading to the kitchen. "Mrs. Henderson complained about the coffee again, said it was too weak. I swear she just likes to complain." And old Mr. Henderson ordered the usual and then argued about what the usual was. She pulled a Tupperware container out of the fridge. Leftover meatloaf. Want some? Nah, I grabbed a burger on the way home from Tony's. Got a 75 Cutlass in tomorrow morning, engine trouble. Probably a clogged fuel filter, but Tony thinks it's something bigger, probably just wants to charge the guy more. He finally looked at her, a tired smile gracing his lips. You look beat, honey. I am. Sarah sat opposite him, her plate in her lap, just glad it's Friday tomorrow, and then a whole weekend. They talked about trivial things, Mrs. Henderson's perpetually weak coffee, Tony's latest automotive conspiracy theory, the local high school's disappointing baseball season, the weather report predicting rain for Friday. It was the kind of unremarkable, comforting conversation that anchors a life, a quiet domestic symphony played out in countless homes across America. Before bed, David kissed Sarah's forehead, his lips warm against her skin. Love you, sweet pea. Sarah returned the sentiment, her eyes already heavy with sleep, leaning into his embrace. Friday, May 28th, dawned gray and drizzly, as predicted. David left for Tony's auto shop before Sarah even woke up, leaving a note on the fridge. Coffee's on, got your favorite mug out, love ya. Sarah had a late shift, starting at noon. She spent the morning puttering around the house, listening to the radio, humming along to Fleetwood Mac, and sketching a wedding cake design for a regular customer. The drizzle outside turned to a steady, rhythmic rain against the windows, a soothing backdrop to her quiet creativity. Around 11:30 a.m., just before she had to leave for work, David called. Hey, he said, his voice a little rushed, the sounds of a busy garage faintly in the background. Listen, Tony gave me a break. Said I could knock off early if I got this Cutlass done. I'm thinking maybe we could head out for a drive tonight, clear our heads before the weekend really kicks in, get some fresh air. Sarah smiled. David loved driving, especially with no particular destination in mind, just the open road, the wind in their hair. A drive where, I was thinking down the parkway, maybe grab some fish and chips down in Youngstown, or just head towards the lake, see the mist. Get away from this miserable rain for a bit. We could even go towards Lockport, see the old canal boats. His voice held a hint of genuine excitement, a desire to shake off the week's dust. We haven't done that in a while, just us, no agenda. Sounds good, Sarah agreed, a spark of anticipation in her own voice. I've got to be at work in 30 minutes, though. No, I mean when you're done, I'll meet you there. My shift ends at 5 o'clock. You get off at 9 o'clock, right? Yeah, 9 p.m. Okay, perfect. I'll pick you up from the daily grind at 9:15. Maybe grab something quick there if you're hungry, and then we'll just drive. What do you say, spontaneous adventure? Sounds like a plan, David. See you then. Love you too. That was the last time Eleanor Thompson, Sarah's younger sister, ever heard David or Sarah Miller's voice. That call, a mundane arrangement for an ordinary evening drive, became the last thread connecting them to a life that was about to unravel into a terrifying, enduring void. The casual promise of a drive, a simple declaration of love, hung in the air, soon to be swallowed by a chilling silence. Eleanor often replayed that conversation in her mind, searching for any hidden meaning, any missed sign. There was never one. It was just a Friday night, just a couple planning their weekend. Eleanor Thompson, 25 and fresh out of college, was burning the midnight oil on Friday, May 28th, at her tiny apartment in Buffalo. She was preparing for a job interview, the kind that could finally launch her into a career in publishing, the competitive world of words and deadlines she'd always dreamed of. She'd promised Sarah she'd call her the next day, Saturday, to debrief, maybe even drive out to North Tonawanda for a celebratory dinner if the interview went well. Sarah, ever her biggest cheerleader, had helped her practice her answers over the phone earlier in the week. Saturday morning arrived, gray and cool. Eleanor woke up with a nervous flutter in her stomach, reviewing her mental notes for the interview, the smell of stale coffee lingering in her small kitchen. She called Sarah around 10 a.m., expecting to hear her sister's cheerful voice, perhaps a little tired from her late shift, recounting the woes of Mrs. Henderson's coffee. The phone rang and rang, finally clicking over to the answering machine. A pre-recorded message in Sarah's bright voice instructed callers to leave a message. Eleanor, slightly puzzled, hung up. Sarah rarely slept in past 9, even after a late night. David would usually be up, puttering in the garage or reading the paper. Maybe they went out early, Eleanor mused to herself, shrugging off a faint prickle of unease. A spur-of-the-moment thing, like David said. They probably went to grab breakfast somewhere. She tried again at noon after her interview, feeling a mix of elation from a job well done and exhaustion from the emotional drain. Still no answer. This time, the prickle of unease sharpened into a definite prod. David was meticulous about his schedule, especially for work. He was due at Tony's on Saturday morning for a few hours. And Sarah, though more spontaneous, would usually leave a note for Eleanor or their parents if they were going away for the weekend. This wasn't like them. Eleanor called her parents, Martha and Robert Thompson, in Lewiston, a short drive from North Tonawanda. Her mother, Martha, a woman whose worry lines seemed permanently etched into her face, confirmed she hadn't heard from them either since Thursday. "I tried calling them this morning, too," Martha said, her voice already tinged with concern. "Just wanted to see if they were coming for dinner tomorrow or needed anything. No answer. It's not like Sarah to be out of touch this long." Robert, Eleanor's father, usually the more pragmatic and calming of the two, tried to reassure them. "They're probably just on a spontaneous trip, Martha. You know David likes to just get in the car and drive. They'll call when they get back, I'm sure of it. Give them a little space." But even his voice lacked its usual conviction, a faint tremor betraying his own burgeoning anxiety. The calls continued throughout Saturday afternoon and evening, each unanswered ring amplifying the growing anxiety. The family's worry was a palpable thing, a knot tightening in the pit of their stomachs. Eleanor eventually drove out to North Tonawanda herself, arriving at the Miller's house just before dark. The small yellow house was dark, silent, and locked. David's modest 1978 Ford Fairmont, usually parked proudly in the driveway, was conspicuously absent. This was the first concrete sign that something was truly amiss. The car missing meant they weren't just at home, asleep, or ignoring the phone. They were gone, and they hadn't told anyone. A cold dread seeped into Eleanor's bones, chilling her to the marrow. Sunday morning, May 30th, the unease morphed into full-blown panic. David hadn't shown up for work at Tony's auto shop. Tony, a man who didn't tolerate tardiness or no-shows, a stickler for punctuality, called their home repeatedly, then called the Thompson residence, genuinely worried. "David ain't missed a day in 5 years," he told Robert, his gruff voice uncharacteristically soft, a rare display of vulnerability. "Something ain't right, Robert, something real bad." Tony had driven by the Miller house himself that morning, hoping to catch David before his shift. He'd seen nothing. Robert and Martha, along with Eleanor, made the agonizing decision to call the police. The Niagara Falls Police Department initially handled the report, given the Miller's address. Officer Peterson, taking the call, was professional but detached, accustomed to runaway teens and disgruntled spouses. "It's only been a couple of days, sir. Adults have the right to disappear. They'll probably turn up when they run out of money or realize they forgot their toothbrush." "But David wouldn't miss work, officer," Robert insisted, his voice tight with fear, frustration mounting. "And Sarah wouldn't just go without telling us. They're not flighty people." Officer Peterson noted the details: names, descriptions, the missing car, the last known contact. He promised to put out an alert, but the sense of urgency conveyed was minimal. Missing persons cases, especially involving adults, were often frustrating. Most returned within 48 hours. The family's pleas for a full-scale search were met with bureaucratic caution. The family spent Sunday in a haze of phone calls, unanswered questions, and growing dread. They drove by the house again, hoping against hope to see the Fairmont in the driveway, to see lights on in the windows. The house remained dark, a silent sentinel to their fear, its yellow paint taking on a sickly hue in the failing light. Monday morning, David still hadn't shown up for work. Tony called again, this time more insistent, bordering on frantic. He'd driven by the house himself. Nothing. The police still offered little solace. "We've entered them into the NCIC database, sir," Officer Peterson explained, his voice flat. "But until there's evidence of foul play or they're minors, it's classified as a voluntary absence. We can't launch a full search and rescue operation based on a hunch." Eleanor, however, refused to accept this. She knew her sister. Sarah would never leave without a word, not to her parents, not to her. Her mind raced with possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. She and her parents drove the routes David and Sarah often took, along the Niagara River Parkway, past Goat Island, around the Whirlpool Rapids. Every turn of the road felt heavy with unanswered questions. The majestic spray of the falls, usually a source of awe and wonder, now seemed ominous, its ceaseless roar a mocking echo of their silent worry, its immense power a symbol of their helplessness. Then on Tuesday, June 1st, a break, or what felt like one, finally came, though it offered little comfort. a local resident out for an early morning walk along the old Niagara Falls Boulevard, about 5 miles north of the city center and a mile or so from the river, noticed something odd. Parked casually on the shoulder of a less traveled stretch, partially obscured by a stand of overgrown sumac and wild daisies, was a pale blue 1978 Ford Fairmont. It looked abandoned, its paint dulled by the morning dew. It was David Miller's car. The resident, a Mrs. Agnes Periwinkle, a meticulous woman known for her keen observations, had seen the missing persons bulletin on the local news channel the night before, a small, blurry photo of the Millers flashing across her screen. She called the police immediately, her voice trembling with a mixture of civic duty and dread. The Niagara Falls Police Department, now with a tangible lead, dispatched a patrol car and Detective Frank O'Malley. The discovery of the car was a turning point, but not a comforting one. The Fairmont was locked, but the keys were found in the ignition, dangling innocuously. The doors were unlocked, but there was no sign of forced entry or struggle. David's worn leather wallet, with a small amount of cash, was on the dashboard. Sarah's beige purse, containing her identification and credit cards, was on the passenger seat. Their briefcases, which they sometimes used for weekend trips, were gone. A crumpled, water-damaged map of the Finger Lakes region, circled with potential wineries and scenic routes, lay open on the back seat. Everything was too neat, too ordinary for a violent abduction, yet too inexplicable for a simple walk away. The car was meticulously processed by the NFPD's small forensic team. Fingerprints were taken. Hairs and fibers collected. The trunk was empty. Nothing seemed disturbed. It was as if David and Sarah had simply stepped out of the car, locked it, and vanished into thin air. There were no notes, no signs of a struggle. No broken glass, no blood, nothing to indicate a violent encounter, just an absence. The initial police theory shifted from voluntary absence to probable accident near the falls or foul play. But without bodies, without witnesses, without a clear crime scene beyond an abandoned vehicle, the case was already becoming a quagmire. The car's location, a mile from the river, suggested they had walked towards the water or were taken there. The massive, churning waters of the Niagara River, leading into the vast expanse of Lake Ontario, had swallowed countless secrets over the centuries. And now, it seemed, it had swallowed David and Sarah Miller whole, their story becoming another local legend whispered in hushed tones. Eleanor felt a cold dread settle deep into her bones. The discovery of the car confirmed her worst fears. This wasn't just a spontaneous trip, not an adventure. Something terrible, unimaginable had happened. The ordinary rhythm of her sister's life had been violently, inexplicably broken, leaving behind only echoes and questions. The discovery of the Fairmont brought the full, grinding machinery of the Niagara Falls Police Department into play, albeit with an air of bewildered frustration. Detective Frank O'Malley, a seasoned investigator with 20 years on the force, was assigned the lead. O'Malley was a man forged in the industrial grit of the city, his face a roadmap of hard cases and long nights, his shoulders permanently hunched under the weight of unsolved mysteries. He had seen it all: domestic disputes, bar fights gone bad, petty thefts, and the occasional gruesome murder. But this case, with its eerie lack of clues and its unsettling quiet, felt different. It was a phantom, leaving no trace. O'Malley meticulously re-interviewed everyone: Tony from the auto shop, Sarah's colleagues at the Daily Grind, the Periwinkle woman who found the car, neighbors, friends, family. David and Sarah's lives, laid bare, revealed nothing but normalcy. No secret lovers, no gambling debts, no sudden enemies. They were just, by all accounts, good, average people, indistinguishable from hundreds of other couples in North Tonawanda. It was this very lack of any dark undercurrent that made their disappearance so perplexing, so chilling. The search expanded. Dive teams were dispatched to the Niagara River, despite the overwhelming odds. The sheer power of the water, especially in the rapids leading to the falls and beyond, meant that anything entering it was quickly swept away, pulverized, or carried far downstream, possibly into Lake Ontario, never to be seen again. Helicopters buzzed overhead for days, their rotors chopping at the humid air, searching the dense foliage of the Niagara Gorge, the treacherous cliffs, the rocky shorelines. Ground search parties, comprised of police officers and, later, desperate volunteers from the community, combed every inch of the wooded areas around where the car was found, extending towards the riverbanks. They found discarded beer cans, old tires, a lost dog, but no trace of David or Sarah Miller. The search grids were exhaustive, but the wilderness was vast and unforgiving. The police theorized several possibilities, each with its own flaws. 1. Accidental fall. They walked towards the river, perhaps for a late-night stroll, stumbled, and were swept away. Plausible given the car's proximity to the water, but no evidence of a struggle or a slip at the bank, no screams heard, and both were careful, sensible adults, familiar with the dangers of the river. 2. Voluntary disappearance, less likely after car found. They staged their disappearance but left their car, wallets, and purse with valuables intact. This made little sense, as it looked more like a sudden, unplanned departure. If they wanted to vanish, why leave their means of identification? 3. Foul play. They were abducted from their car or lured away, then disposed of. But by whom, and why leave the car with valuables intact? It seemed designed to look like an accidental fall or a runaway, but the details didn't quite fit the pattern of typical abductions O'Malley had seen. There was no ransom note, no demand, no indication of a motive. The Thompson family, particularly Eleanor, became a constant, desperate presence at the police station. Eleanor, usually reserved, a quiet and academic young woman, transformed into a fierce advocate for her sister and brother-in-law. She barraged O'Malley with questions, offering theories, recounting every detail she could remember from her last conversations with Sarah, her mind a relentless detective, searching for something, anything. They wouldn't just go detective, she insisted, her voice raw with sleepless nights, her eyes red from crying. Sarah would have called me. She would have called Mom. They had plans. The Finger Lakes trip, my interview, her bakery dreams. This isn't them. O'Malley, though empathetic, was getting nowhere. Miss Thompson, we're doing everything we can. The river, it doesn't give up its secrets easily. And without a crime scene, without any direct evidence of foul play, our hands are tied to a certain extent. His voice was weary, reflecting the brick wall he kept hitting. The initial flurry of media attention, local news channels running, missing couple segments, the Buffalo News carrying daily updates, their faces plastered on milk cartons, slowly began to fade. Other stories, other tragedies took their place. The Miller couple case, as it became known, drifted from front-page news to a small column, then to the archives, a cold statistical entry in a growing ledger of unsolved disappearances. For Eleanor and her parents, the silence was deafening, the absence a physical weight. Martha Thompson retreated into a profound grief, her once vibrant spirit dimmed, her laughter replaced by quiet sighs. Robert, stoic and outwardly strong, grew thinner, his eyes perpetually haunted, often staring blankly into the middle distance, lost in thought. Their house in Lewiston, once filled with laughter and the aroma of Martha's Sunday cooking, became a quiet shrine to absence, a mausoleum of unspoken fears. Eleanor, however, refused to let go. She papered the region with homemade flyers, tacking them to lampposts in North Tonawanda, Niagara Falls, Lewiston, even venturing into Buffalo, her small car packed with stacks of photocopies. She spoke to anyone who would listen, retelling the story, clinging to the hope that someone somewhere had seen something, anything. But leads were non-existent, tips mostly turning out to be cruel hoaxes or misguided speculation. The hot summer of 1982 passed into a bleak autumn, the vibrant leaves of western New York turning to brittle brown and then falling, mirroring the family's hopes. Then a cold, unforgiving western New York winter descended, burying the land in snow and the Miller case deeper into mystery. Every holiday, every birthday was a fresh wound, a reminder of David and Sarah's missing presence at the dinner table, in family photos. The family's hopes dwindled with each passing season. The consensus, whispered among friends and relatives, was that David and Sarah had gone into the water, a tragic accident, and the Niagara River had claimed them. It was a brutal, unsatisfying conclusion, but one that offered a semblance of an end to the agonizing uncertainty, a way for people to move on. Eleanor, though, couldn't move on. O'Malley, despite his best efforts, was forced to classify the case as an open, inactive missing persons file. There was simply nothing more to go on. No bodies, no suspects, no witnesses, no physical evidence of foul play beyond the abandoned car. The file sat on his desk, a constant, nagging reminder of a case he couldn't close, a puzzle with too many missing pieces. He'd look at the photos of the young, smiling couple, their faces full of life and promise, and wonder day after day. What happened to them? Did they simply walk into the great unknown, or were they taken? It was the kind of case that burrowed under a detective's skin and stayed there. The years crawled by. The 1980s gave way to the 1990s. Technology advanced, but it offered no retrospective solutions for cases from an earlier era without fresh evidence. Eleanor Thompson finished her degree, moved to New York City, built a career in book publishing, rising through the ranks, but her heart remained tethered to North Tonawanda, to the memory of her sister. She visited her parents regularly, their shared grief a silent, heavy companion that never left the table. Martha and Robert had aged dramatically, their health fragile, their once robust figures now stooped and weary. They never stopped hoping for closure, for a phone call, for something to explain the unexplainable. Eleanor maintained contact with O'Malley occasionally, long after he retired in the late 1990s, becoming a kind of unofficial historian for the case, forever asking, "Anything new, detective?" The answer was always the same, delivered with a sigh of resignation. "Nothing, Eleanor, I'm sorry, we just don't have anything." The Miller house on the quiet street eventually sold, the peeling yellow paint refreshed by new owners, the memories of David and Sarah fading into the background of a new family's life. The daily grind eventually closed, replaced by a modern coffee chain, its scent of fresh brewed coffee and frying bacon replaced by the impersonal aroma of mass-produced espresso. Tony's auto shop was still there, but Tony himself was long retired, his gruffness replaced by a younger, more energetic proprietor. The world moved on, but for Eleanor, the calendar stopped on May 28, 1982. The roar of Niagara Falls, even miles away, seemed to echo in her mind, a constant, unsettling whisper of what might have been, a terrifying symphony of loss. The case was cold, frozen solid by the relentless passage of time and the indifferent power of the river. 2 decades, 20 years of holidays missed, birthdays uncelebrated, and the quiet, persistent ache of not knowing. May 2002 saw Eleanor Thompson, now 45, return to North Tonawanda. Her mother, Martha, had passed away the previous winter, her heart finally giving out after years of silent sorrow, her final years spent gazing out a window, forever waiting for a phone call that never came. Eleanor had come to help her father, Robert, sort through Martha's belongings. The house in Lewiston felt heavier than ever, saturated with loss, its rooms filled with ghosts. Eleanor, a successful editor in a bustling New York publishing house, carried the scars of her sister's disappearance like an internal tattoo. She looked at old photographs, her fingers tracing Sarah's vibrant smile, David's earnest gaze, their youthful innocence captured forever. The lack of closure was a perpetual open wound, festering beneath the surface of her professional competence and carefully constructed urban life. She had tried therapy, support groups, anything to quell the gnawing uncertainty, but the answers always eluded her. How could 2 people so full of life and plans just vanish without a trace, without a single piece of evidence? Back in North Tonawanda, the town itself seemed to have undergone a facelift, a march of progress erasing old landmarks. Familiar shops were gone, replaced by chain stores and new developments. The streets were busier, the cars sleeker, the air hummed with a different kind of energy, a new century's hum. The old Boathouse district, a collection of dilapidated, privately owned shacks and small docks along a less frequented bend of the Niagara River, about 2 miles south of the Miller's old house, was slated for demolition. It was part of a broader urban renewal initiative, transforming the neglected waterfront into a public park and walking trail. These ramshackle structures, many abandoned since the 1960s and 70s, had long been eyesores, havens for local teens, and forgotten relics of a bygone era when personal boats were more common and waterfront property less valuable. The city council had finally secured the funding and the political will to clear the blight. On a muggy morning in late May, precisely 20 years and a few days after David and Sarah Miller's disappearance, a demolition crew was working on the last of these boathouses. It was a particularly stubborn structure, a 2-story wood frame building, its foundations partially submerged in the river mud, its upper story listing precariously, a skeleton clinging to the earth. Decades of damp, dry rot and neglect had made it a hazardous puzzle to dismantle. As a particularly forceful swing of a wrecking ball tore into the aged timber of the back wall, a cascade of debris, splintered wood, rusty corrugated metal, and a thick layer of compacted dust rained down, creating a choking cloud. One of the crew members, a burly man named Gus, operating a small bobcat, was clearing a fresh pile of rubble. He noticed something unusual, something that glinted faintly. It wasn't just wood or metal. There was a small, oblong, dark object, partially buried. Curious, Gus hopped out of his machine, wiping sweat from his brow. He kicked at the debris, clearing it away, revealing a rusted metal box, no larger than a shoebox, covered in river silt and grime. It looked like it had been hidden deep within the crawl space, perhaps behind a false panel, obscured by a collapsed section of the foundation, only now exposed by the structural collapse. The box felt surprisingly heavy for its size. Gus, whose grandfather had been a local fisherman and full of stories of the old river, knew a bit about the old boathouses. They were sometimes used for all sorts of things, not just boats' speakeasies during Prohibition, makeshift gambling dens, or even storage for illicit goods. He carefully, gingerly pried open the corroded lid. Inside, wrapped in several layers of brittle, decaying oilcloth, were a few items. A distinctive Zippo lighter, its chrome dulled by time but still recognizable with an engraved DM on its side, a small piece of craftsmanship. A silk scarf, its once vibrant auburn pattern now faded and stained by what looked like river water and time, but the delicate material still hinted at its former elegance. And most importantly, a small, box-shaped camera, its leather casing cracked, its lens cloudy, and a small, water-damaged notebook, its pages swollen and fused together. Gus, a man not easily rattled by much, felt a genuine chill run down his spine despite the humid air. He had seen the old flyers, heard the whispers in town about the Miller couple. He knew the lighter, the scarf. This wasn't just junk, this was history and potentially a missing piece to a 2-decade-old mystery. He immediately called his supervisor, his voice hushed, who in turn called the Niagara Falls Police Department, ensuring no one else touched the fragile contents. Detective Angela Rossi, a sharp, ambitious investigator with the newly established cold case unit, answered the call. At 35, she represented a new generation of law enforcement, armed with modern forensic tools and a dogged determination to bring answers to long-suffering families. She remembered reading the Miller case file when she first joined the unit, a baffling, frustrating lack of evidence that stood out even among the many cold cases. When she arrived at the Boathouse demolition site, the air was thick with the smell of damp wood, pulverized plaster, and something else, a faint, metallic tang of age and decay, a smell of hidden secrets finally exposed. The careful handling of the box was paramount. The items were carefully collected and transported to the police lab in Buffalo, sealed in evidence bags. The Zippo lighter and silk scarf were quickly identified by Eleanor, who had received the call from Rossi, her heart hammering against her ribs. A tremor ran through her voice as she confirmed the scarf was indeed Sarah's, a special gift David had given her for their first anniversary. The lighter, a custom piece, was unequivocally David's. Her hope, dormant for 2 decades, surged, fierce and terrifying, a painful resurgence of an emotion she thought she had buried. The real prize, however, was the camera and the notebook. The police lab technicians, using advanced techniques not available in 1982, worked painstakingly on the camera. The film, a roll of Kodak Gold 100, was old, brittle, and water-damaged, but modern restoration methods offered a slim chance. Specialists delicately worked in a darkroom, using chemical baths and digital enhancement. After days of careful, almost surgical work, a few images, albeit grainy, faded, and distorted, began to emerge. The first few frames showed typical vacation photos. Sarah laughing by a picnic basket, David trying to fix a faulty spark plug on the Fairmont, a blurry shot of the Niagara Falls mistaken from a scenic overlook. Then the images changed. They became furtive, taken from a distance, shaky. The old boathouse itself, from the exterior, then a grainy shot of a small, nondescript fishing boat pulling up to the boathouse in the dead of night, its lights cut, silhouetted figures moving in the shadows. Another shot, even blurrier, seemed to show crates being unloaded from the boat into the boathouse. The last 3 frames were the most chilling, the final act of a terrible drama. A close-up out of focus of a man's angry face, distorted by the lens and the film's decay, but clearly menacing, his features contorted in rage. The final frame was almost entirely black, a vague shape, a violent scuffle, then nothing but darkness. The notebook, carefully dried and preserved using freeze-drying techniques, was even more revelatory. It was Sarah's personal journal, her neat handwriting filling the pages, initially optimistic and full of life. The initial entries were mundane, discussing work, dreams of her bakery, their upcoming Finger Lakes trip, the small joys and annoyances of daily life. But then, in the entries from mid-May 1982, a different, more anxious tone emerged. May 15th, David and I went for a walk down by the old boathouses tonight. He wanted to check on an engine part he thought he saw someone selling cheap from a boat. Saw something strange at the old derelict one near the bend, the big one with the collapsing roof. A boat we don't recognize and men moving things in the dark. Felt off. David said not to worry, probably just local fishermen moving their gear. But it was late, almost midnight, and they looked not like fishermen, too furtive, too quiet. May 20th. Went back to the boathouse again, foolish, I know. David was consumed by curiosity, a bug he can't shake. He thinks they're smuggling something, not just fishing. Saw them again tonight. Different men this time, but the same nondescript boat. Heard hushed voices, saw a flashlight beam on what looked like big wrapped packages being pulled from the boat. David wants to tell the police. I'm scared. What if they see us? What if this is more than just a little smuggling? He said we have to gather more evidence first. May 26th, David says we have to do something. It's not right, he says, people doing this kind of thing, right under everyone's noses. He thinks it's liquor, maybe cigarettes, coming in from Canada, but he suspects there's more to it. He said he took some pictures with his old camera, the one from our honeymoon. Said he's going to develop them and then take it all to the police, finally. I just want this to be over. I have a bad feeling about this, a really bad feeling, deep in my gut. The last entry, dated May 28, 1982, the very day they disappeared, was short, scribbled in a hurried, almost panicked hand, the ink slightly smeared. David called, going for a drive after work. He's going to bring the camera. He wants to show me something else he saw, something more definitive. Said he thinks he saw who was involved, a guy from town he recognized from Tony's auto shop, a regular customer with a shady reputation. I told him to be careful 100 times, said he would. We're meeting at 9:15 at the Daily Grind. I hope this is the end of it. My stomach is in knots, praying for us. The journal provided the terrifying, heartbreaking answer to the how and why. David and Sarah hadn't just stumbled into an accident. They hadn't run away. They had stumbled into something far darker, a clandestine operation they believed was their civic duty to expose, and it had cost them their lives. They had been murdered, silenced for what they saw and what they intended to do. Their ordinary lives had collided with a criminal underworld operating in the shadows of their quiet town. Detective Rossi and her team spent months following the new leads. The boathouse discovery wasn't just a random act, it was a deliberate disposal site, meticulously chosen to conceal the truth. The boathouse was isolated, difficult to access from the land side, making it perfect for illicit activities and a clandestine hiding spot for evidence. The valuables left in their car were likely a deliberate attempt by the perpetrators to mislead investigators, suggesting a runaway scenario or an accidental fall into the falls, shifting suspicion away from foul play. The boathouse was close enough to the Millers' home that it would have been within their walking or short driving distance, a familiar shortcut or scenic route. The initial police investigation, focused on the falls and the immediate area of the car, never even considered searching the dilapidated boathouse district with any rigor beyond a cursory glance. It was simply a lost clue, buried by time, neglect, and the sheer volume of mundane details in the vast landscape. Rossi's team identified the boat type and traced possible ownership from old local records, cross-referencing with other minor offenses. They delved into old police reports from the early 80s, looking for any reports of small-time smuggling or missing persons that coincided with the area. They uncovered a small, loosely organized network that had been running illegal alcohol and cigarettes, and occasionally other contraband, from Canada across the Niagara River, using the labyrinthine inlets and abandoned structures along the waterfront. The operation, small-scale but profitable, had been active in the early 80s, before federal agencies cracked down on larger rings in the mid-80s, forcing the local remnants to go even further underground or disband. They even identified a person of interest, an elderly man named Wally Jenkins, who had a checkered past of petty crimes, including minor smuggling charges in the late 70s, and had owned a similar fishing boat in 1982. He also had a dilapidated property near the Boathouse district which he used as a fish camp, and records showed he had a history of involvement in illicit activities, though nothing violent. Jenkins, now infirm, suffering from advanced dementia, and living in a state-run nursing home, denied everything, his memory conveniently hazy or genuinely gone. Without the bodies of David and Sarah, and with the passage of 2 decades, building a definitive case for murder against him was nearly impossible. The grainy photos and a 20-year-old journal, while powerfully suggestive, weren't enough for a conviction without corroborating physical evidence or a confession. The law demanded more. Eleanor, reading Sarah's last entry, the hurried scrawl betraying her sister's terror, felt a fresh wave of grief, mixed with an overwhelming sense of vindication. Her sister hadn't abandoned them. She had been brave, perhaps foolishly so, but brave beyond measure, standing up for what she believed was right. That this was the terrible truth, finally revealed, a hidden chapter of their lives brought into the light. It wasn't the total closure she had craved, not a recovered body, not a convicted killer behind bars, not a complete resolution. But it was an answer, a story she could finally tell. It meant she could finally understand their last moments, and in that understanding there was a different, more profound kind of peace. The silence was finally broken. The case of David and Sarah Miller remains officially unsolved, an active cold case, its file reopened but its conclusion elusive. The Boathouse site, once a place of darkness and concealment, is now part of the new waterfront park, a gentle walking path leading past where the dilapidated structure once stood, a quiet testament to the city's transformation. A small, discreet plaque placed by Eleanor in 2005 marks the spot, in memory of David and Sarah Miller, whose spirit of justice shines on. May 28, 1982. Remembered, the exact location of their final rest may forever remain unknown, but their courage would not be forgotten. The Niagara River continues its relentless journey, an indifferent witness to human tragedy and triumph. Its power, once feared as the likely instrument of their demise, now seemed less significant than the human choices that led David and Sarah Miller to their final, courageous stand against darkness. Eleanor knew their bodies might never be found, forever absorbed by the Great Lake, but their story for her was no longer a mystery. It was a tragedy born of ordinary heroism, uncovered 20 years later by a rusty box and a wrecking ball, a testament to the enduring power of truth, even when buried deep. The mist still rises from the falls, a constant, beautiful reminder of the wild, untamed nature that borders human life, sometimes offering solace, sometimes swallowing secrets whole, and sometimes, with a little help from time and chance, revealing them.